everyone. Do we have anyone watching us? If anyone can just leave a comment to say they can hear us.
Everyone's outside enjoying the sunshine.
I know. I'm staring at the sun now like, oh, I really want to go out. Easter weekend as well, isn't it?
That's
Can't
it,
go
yeah.
anywhere. Stay in the back garden. Is anyone watching? There's quite a few people that wanted to watch. Alexia, AD, can you just comment if you can hear us, guys? Yeah, they can. Right then.
Good, excellent.
So, hi everybody. This is Sarah Budden from All About Birth. Today she's going to talk to you about tips on being a great birthing partner. So if you want to get your other half or whoever's being your birthing partner involved, let them watch it with you. She's going to talk to you, demonstrate, and if you've got any questions throughout, please, as usual, just pop them in the comments and I can answer for you. But other than that, over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Jay. Hello everyone, as Jay said, my name is Sarah Budden and I am a doula. I also teach hypnobirthing, pre and postnatal yoga and lots of birth preparation. So in my role as a birth doula, I do a lot of birth support. I often support alongside a client's birth partner, whether that be their mum or their partner, their husband, however that is. So I often work with couples to help them support each other, or at least to help the birth partner support the mum. And sometimes I work as a sole birth partner, so as the mum's sole support. So I wanted to talk to you today about being a brilliant birth partner, because I think that lots of dads-to-be or lots of birth partners in the room perhaps feel a little bit at sea sometimes and not know necessarily what their job is. But also I think that in advance it's quite difficult sometimes to maybe think about what kind of things might work. And perhaps even mum herself doesn't really know what she'll want on the day. So it's worth thinking about that and doing some planning in advance so that you can provide the right support for mum. And mum doesn't need to ask too many questions, because the last thing that we want mum doing is asking lots of questions and giving direction when she's having a baby, because she needs to focus on that. And so a well-prepped birth partner is worth their weight in gold. So I would say the first thing really when it comes to being a brilliant birth partner is about the preparation. So it's about doing the communication, having the chats in advance, and doing lots of work before the baby comes. And that can be a really great time for you to work together and to connect with baby and to just be excited about birth and plan what's going to happen when birth does happen. And the first step is really about learning about birth. So I'm sure that lots of mums are probably doing lots and lots of research and doing lots of reading and thinking about birth and how that's going to happen. It's really important that birth partners understand that process too. So it's really important for their own confidence that they understand what's happening in birth, that they understand what normal physiological birth looks like and how a woman's body works and how the mother and the baby work together during labour. And it's also important for birth partners to understand what interventions might happen and when they might happen, so they also get what they can be part of that process and understand what's going on. So as I say, it's about confidence, it's about being able to remain calm, it's about understanding what's happening so that you can reassure mum and whilst yourself being happy and confident about what's going on. So I know that it might feel like something that we might not necessarily want to know much about, but trust me, the more you know about birth, the more it will amaze you, and also the happier you will be in the actual birth itself. So doing lots of planning, lots of prep with mum is really, really important. And I also would say that sort of then rolls into the birth plan. So we talk about birth plans lots, whether you call them birth plans or birth preferences or whatever it is that you want to call them. It's a really important process to go through, is this idea of thinking about what might happen during birth and how you might like your birth to play out. Not because what you're trying to do is create this sort of birth that has got to happen this way, because birth is unpredictable and it sometimes doesn't go how you think it might. But rather, that whole planning process gives you the opportunity to talk about what ifs, and what if this happens, or what if it happens like that, and what would you prefer, and what's really, really important to you. And it gives you lots of opportunities to do research and think about the different aspects of your birth that you'd like to control, and if for some reason that bit comes out of your control, how you can regain control about bits that are really important. So I think it's really vital that a birth partner plays their part in understanding the birth plan, all the preferences, and understanding why mum wants things to happen that way, and so that they also understand and they get what the plan is and how that plan might shift and what the plan might look like if it does shift. And that's really crucial, really, because then it can be up to the birth partner to do the communication with the healthcare professionals about the plan and about what the mother wants. Because ideally, as I said right at the start, we want to avoid mum having to come out of her birth zone and explain, well, actually, I really wanted to do this, this and this. And if a partner's really familiar with the birth plan, then the partner can do that communication for mum, and that really, really helps her to stay in her zone and not feel like she's got to chat through her birth plan with her healthcare professionals. So lots and lots of understanding of birth is really great, and also, as I say, lots and lots of communication and chatting through the birth plan. It's not just mum's remit, it is definitely dad's remit and birth partner's remit as well, to understand what mum wants in that birth plan. And of course, dad might have his own preferences, or birth partner might have their own preferences in there about things that are important to them. So whether that might be things like cutting the cord, or announcing what sex the baby is, or having skin-to-skin contact, or getting into a birth pool. Like all of these things, you might think, okay, well, I want to do those, but not necessarily have the opportunity to communicate that on the day. But if it's in the birth plan, then everyone's got it there for them to read. So education at birth and birth plans. The other big thing I would say, really, for a birth partner is that your role is about being both protector and generator of oxytocin. So oxytocin is the love hormone, and it's the hormone that is absolutely crucial in birth for two reasons, really. First of all, because it's the hormone that is really generating contractions. So on your uterus, you have lots and lots of oxytocin receptors, and they multiply lots just before birth. And you want those oxytocin receptors to be flooded with oxytocin during labour, because then it makes the contractions of the uterus really, really effective and efficient at what they're doing. So you want lots and lots of oxytocin going for that reason, but you also want lots of oxytocin going because for a mum, oxytocin brings with it lots of endorphins and feel good, and it's your body's natural response to dealing with labour. So the more oxytocin you can have going on in a birth room, the better it is for mum, and also for the birth partner, because there's nothing more amazing than a room full of oxytocin, whether you're mum or the birth partner, or it's such a wonderful thing to feel in a room. So as a birth partner, one of your roles is to be guardian of that oxytocin, to protect the oxytocin so that it doesn't get scared off, because oxytocin is quite shy as hormones go, and also to make sure that you're in a place to generate more oxytocin and keep the oxytocin flowing. So, for example, one of the things that I would do as a birth partner when I go into a room is to make it dark. So close the curtains and bring the lights down, bring out the fairy lights, make it nice and cosy. And I would, make it nice and... oxytocin just likes warmth, and it likes dark, and it likes quiet, and as I say, imagine it's like a shy animal, because that's how you make sure that you get lots of oxytocin. And it also dislikes things like strangers and loud noises and interruptions and all that kind of thing. So that is the other thing that I really recommend, is to think about ways that you can protect the oxytocin, but also that you can generate it. And the easiest way to think about generating oxytocin is think about what makes babies, basically helps get babies out. So when you make a baby, it's unlikely that you're probably in a really bright room with lots and lots of strangers and the lights on full blast and some lots of people talking. And so if you can generate oxytocin and, protect what you have, through all the things that you do together that make you happy, that make you laugh, that make you smile, that make you feel good. So that might be things like, looking at pictures on your phone of your wedding or your firstborn if you've already got kids. It might be a nice massage that I'm going to demonstrate in a second. And so lots and lots of ways to make a mum feel safe, and then there's lots and lots of oxytocin flowing. So education, birth plan, keep the oxytocin flowing and be the oxytocin guardian. I think that for birth partners, there's sometimes a feeling of perhaps feeling like a bit of a spare part when birth cracks on. So once in the early stages, there's lots of practical stuff to do, and we'll talk about that in a second. After the baby's here, there's practical stuff to do as well. But sometimes birth partners can feel a little bit like basically a spare part in a room. And one thing I would say to all birth partners is it's okay for you just to be there. So there doesn't always have to be something to do. And once you've got your oxytocin going and you've communicated stuff to healthcare professionals and all that stuff, then it's okay just to be in the room. So your presence in the room will be really, really valuable to a birthing mum, even though she looks like she's in a zone of you not even realising you're there. She will know you're there, she will feel that you're there, even if you're not physically touching her. And it's okay for you just to sit and breathe with her, which I know sounds a bit hippie and a bit woo, but it really does make a difference sometimes to a mum just to know that her birth partner's there. She's chosen you because she wants you to be there with her. You're really special and important to her. So just being in the room is sometimes really, really important, and there's nothing to do. Jane, have you got any questions for me at this point then? Where I'm rambling on.
No, it's fine. There was one question. I hope I've said this right. Siobhan, it's got that weird spelling. She's asked, her partner's really squeamish, and
yes.
Do you have any tips for him, because she's worried about how he'll react to it all?
Yeah, I suppose first of all, birth isn't necessarily as gruesome and scary as we might think, and as we probably see when we watch things like One Born Every Minute, and when we watch films about birth and stuff like that. So the first thing I would say is it goes back to the education stuff, and if you can learn about birth and understand what's happening, then that is a really good place to start. Now, so ordinarily I would say understanding what's going on in the process of birth means reading books, talking to people who understand birth, going to classes, online workshops, that kind of thing. And then it's about watching birth, because the more we can leave our own shizzle about what we know about birth out of it, because we've got all this stuff built up in our heads over the period of time from when we are told about our own birth and our brothers and sisters' births, and mostly the stories we get are, it was horrendous, it was really long, it took forever, it was really painful, there's nothing worse than childbirth. So we have all that built up, and what we need to do is get rid of some of that stuff by getting good birth education, but also then by filling our brain with lots of good birth footage, not One Born Every Minute footage, but stuff like that shows like birth in its, in its state without all of the bright lights and all of the shouting and all that kind of stuff. So, but when you've got somebody who's squeamish, obviously throwing them in at the deep end with a full-on birth is not that great, because they're probably going to go, oh, I'm not sure about that. So what you can do, there are lots of really good computer animation type graphics of birth, which might be a good place to start for somebody who's a bit squeamish, so they can see the mechanics and the science behind it, but they don't see the full, let's say, business end straight away. And that might be a little bit an ease into it. I mean, physically in the birth room, if someone is quite squeamish, I would sort of be asking questions like, is it the hospital that's making them squeamish? Do they not like the smell of hospitals? Do they feel a little bit uncomfortable about that? Because if that is the case, then there's some stuff that they can do just in terms of trying to lower the adrenaline response that they're getting to the hospital scenario, so breathing and stuff like that. Or it might, as I say, if it's the smell, then is it something that they can take, if they take a smell on some essential oil on a hanky or a tissue or something, just to try and get rid of that smell and make the birth room smell slightly different for them, so they don't feel that association with hospitals. I mean, if it's the blood and stuff, like honestly, again, going back to that birth education, there is not much to see. There is not much blood. There is not much stuff going on until the very, very end of birth. And at that point, the connection between birth partner and mum doesn't have to be with birth partner seeing that stuff. They can be very much in the zone together without seeing that stuff. So for somebody who is a bit squeamish, they don't have to see that, but perhaps knowing what is going on and seeing it before might be a really good way to sort of like reduce anxiety around that. And I think also, you see some people you see, or some birth partners feel squeamish, feel dizzy or a little bit lightheaded in the birth room. Something that's really important for them is to their own self-care. So, you could possibly be in a birth room for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 hours. Like, that's a long time to be in a room without a mental break, but also without a physical break. So a break to go and eat, just get some fresh air, all that kind of thing, have a coffee. So it's really important as a birth partner that you look after yourself as well, because you're no use to the birthing woman without looking after yourself. So making sure that you have snacks, making sure you drink lots of water, making sure you go for a walk. I mean, it's a little bit more difficult, and I'll talk about this in a bit more detail in a second, at the moment, just sort of wandering around the hospital, but just having that time out to have a little break is okay. And you can take an opportunity, perhaps when the midwife's in the room, and therefore that mum feels happy and secure and she's got someone with her, to go off and do something, which means that you have a little bit of a break and a little bit of a rest, because it's hard work to be a birth partner. And so it's okay for you to do that, and that should help with any sort of lightheadedness and making sure that you're hydrated and you've got your blood sugar levels under control, that kind of thing.
Brilliant, thank you for answering that.
Okay. And is there anything else at the minute?
No, that's it at the moment. If anyone else has got any questions, please just pop them in the comments.
Yeah, by all means, yeah. So we're talking about education, we've talked about self-care, that's really important. We talked about being an Oxytocin guardian, and we've also talked about helping with the communication on the birth plan front. And I've also talked about sometimes just doing nothing is a really, really powerful thing. The other thing, I suppose, is to think about some of the practical stuff. So knowing stuff like, where's the birth bag, how long is it going to take to get to the hospital, have you got change for the parking machine, if that's what happens at your hospital, knowing what's going in, what's in the birth bag. It's sometimes good to sit down with your birth partner and say, well, look, here's the stuff that's in the birth bag. So and showing them where it is. So that when you're saying, I need some maternity pads, or can you get me my TENS machine, that your birth partner knows what that is, and you're not having to go, well, wait a minute, it's here, is it? Because that is, again, bringing you out of your birth zone. So it's a nice thing to do together. It's look, this is what's in the birth bag, this is what this is what we might need when, and all that kind of thing. And likewise, when baby's here, and perhaps one of your preferences, so your birth partner does puts the nappy on the baby for the first time and dresses the baby, they know what's in the bag and where it is and how to find that stuff without sort of like that being any kind of trauma. So on a practical level, it is very much about talking in advance about that kind of stuff and where it is, and again, thinking about what you want your birth to look like, and thinking about how your partner can help to facilitate that stuff and help you to achieve those things on the birth plan. So it might be that one of the things that you have put in place is that you'd like to be really active during birth. And so you can think of ways that your partner can help you, like explain to them what you mean by active and what kind of positions might be really helpful in birth. So upright positions, perhaps on your hands and knees, using a birth ball, all that kind of stuff. Explaining that to them in advance is really good, because they can go, oh, what about trying this position? You found that really helpful in pregnancy. What about your birth ball? What about doing this? They can give you some ideas perhaps to help you to manage labour and when you maybe have forgotten because you're in the sort of midst of giving birth. So important to explain that stuff to them. And I think also it's important to think about what your plan is postnatally and how your birth partner can support you. So I don't necessarily just mean the immediate postnatal, but I mean once you're back home from hospital, what is it that you would like your partner to do? How is this going to work? Have you had conversations with them around, kind of what's going on with feeding and how you want to feed your baby, and how you're going to make sure that you get plenty of rest and what kind of things that you need from them. At the moment, obviously, we don't have the visitor question because nobody's visiting anyone. But as perhaps things start to change, and in a few months maybe, depending on when your baby's due, as perhaps social distancing is slackened, and there's an opportunity for visiting, how do you want that to play out? And it's useful for partners to be the ones maybe communicating that, well, we don't want any visitors for 3 days, or we do want visitors but you're only coming for an hour, or if you come, don't expect a cup of tea, you need to put the kettle on, or if you come, please bring a meal, or please come, leave a meal and then go. So having those conversations beforehand about how you want it to look and what you want your postnatal baby moon to be like, can help again, sort of like with and the partner can do that, so that communication for you, because even after the birth, they are still your oxytocin guardian. You've got this big oxytocin bubble going on, with new baby and mum dyad and that whole thing about them bonding and you now becoming a family of 3 or maybe 4 or 5 or however many you're going to become. And it's really important to protect oxytocin and keep it going, because that's how you all bond and how everything sort of starts to slot in together. So postnatally as well is really important. And then I was going to specifically actually talk about the current scenario and how birth partners in the current scenario, or how the changes have affected and restrict birth partners and their access during birth. So obviously this is on a trust by trust basis and it's changing all the time. But my understanding is at the moment that certainly if for lots of women, what's happening is that birth partners are only being allowed in once you are being deemed to be in established labour. So on that basis, it's really important to try and, I suppose, stay at home for as long as possible if you feel safe and happy and your oxytocin is flowing at home. Once you get into hospital, if you are deemed to be in established labour, then you'll be transferred into labour ward, and then your partner can accompany you to labour ward, where you will then, once you get onto labour ward, there's kind of no going back in terms of you then having your baby. That is, staying at home for as long as possible has become even more sort of like the guidance, if you like. Having said that, I know that for some women, being at home doesn't necessarily feel like their safe space, and therefore oxytocin can't flow there. So it might be that they are in hospital before they are deemed to be in established labour, and perhaps their birth partner is therefore not permitted to be in the first instance. In which case, it's really important for them to have thought about how are they going to get their oxytocin going without perhaps their birth partner, and how might they feel without their birth partner being there. Likewise, if you are being induced for some reason, if you have agreed to be induced, then on the induction ward, my understanding then is in many hospitals, a birth partner would not be allowed in. So an induction may last a few hours, but it may also last a few days. So in that induction period, you want to do as much as you can to keep your oxytocin going. So how are you going to do that without your birth partner? Lots of things you can do. Obviously, you can communicate by phone and by a sort of video message, things like that. But perhaps if you are going to be in hospital for a period of time before your birth, it might be quite nice for you to think about ways that you can perhaps generate that oxytocin without necessarily even the devices. So whether that is your partner could write you almost like a little letter for every day, or they could put together a scrapbook of pictures and memories, or that kind of thing, or they could pack up some little gifts for you for each day, or they could even record some messages that you can play back, so that you have that contact with your partner and the oxytocin boost without them necessarily being there. And that would also be the case, again, in many hospitals, where if your partner has COVID-19 or is displaying symptoms of it, then you would need to find another birth partner, and therefore, but your birth partner can still be involved to the extent that they can. You can think about ways of bringing them into the room even though they're not physically there. It might be that they put together a playlist for you of the songs that are really important to you, that kind of thing. So think about ways around that, about having them in the room even though they're maybe not physically present.
About having a plan B, you would say. It's just about having a plan B, so if the worst was to happen, think of a backup before you have to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's hopefully it wouldn't happen, and hopefully we won't get to a stage in the current environment where even healthy birth partners are being turned away, and women are being told they can go only on their own. I know that birthrights are working their absolute butts off to make sure that that women do have the support of their birth partner, their chosen birth partner, even though it might only be one, but their chosen birth partner in birth. But of course, it may be that we get to that stage. Hopefully we won't, but if we do, then that all is not lost, and there you have to just be a little bit more innovative about how you get in the room without being in the room. And postnatally as well, so that was the other thing I was going to say, is that again, in many hospitals what happens is once you have had your baby, the transfer up to postnatal ward, if you choose to be transferred to postnatal ward, so many women may, if they've had a pretty straightforward birth, be able to go straight home from labour ward. But if you are going to be transferred to postnatal ward because that is your preference, or because there has been some reason for you to be kept in hospital to be observed, then again, my understanding is that for many hospitals there is no access to the postnatal ward after for visitors. So it could be that you might be in the hospital for maybe 12 hours, 24 hours, a couple of days without access to your partner, in which case, again, having some pre-prepared stuff in your bag, they've written you some letters for each day, or they've done a playlist, or they are going to just thinking about how you're going to be close, because you'll feel that you'll want that support from them, you'll want to see them, and obviously they'll want to see baby as well. So having some ideas around how you might go about that is also really important. So the other thing I suppose around COVID-19 is Cesarean birth, and whether or not again, things change daily and it is a trust by trust basis. But at the moment, restrictions vary, but my understanding is that if you're having a planned Cesarean birth, that provided your partner is not showing symptoms, that they will be able to support you in theatre. If it's an emergency Cesarean, that they may not be able to support you in theatre. So that is why, when we just go back to birth plans for a second, it's so important to have a plan A, a plan B and a plan C. So if you were to have an emergency Cesarean birth, what kind of things would you still want to happen? If your partner is not allowed into theatre, what it might be very important to you that somebody takes photos of the birth, for example. It might be very important to you that baby is immediately or as soon as possible is taken to dad. So just having a think about those things in advance means that you've got a plan in action, so you don't feel like everything's withdrawn. Because the problem at the moment is, because there are lots of doors being closed and lots of things being said, you can't do this, you can't have home birth, you can't go to the sanctuary, you can't, etc. It feels, it feels a little bit like lots of birth choices have gone, and some have, but you can still have control over your birth, and you can still have a positive birth, because you can still, there are lots of things that are still open for you to have control over. Are there any more questions at the moment, Jade?
Someone has sent me a private message. They don't want to use their name. She said that her husband wants to watch the baby come out, but she doesn't want him to see that part of her in case it puts him off her. So she's not quite sure what to do, and if he decides to just watch when she doesn't want him to, and it will make her panic, and she's just worried about it, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean, it is a little bit of a sort of this is a tricky one in many respects, because it does feel like if she is worried during the latter stages of labour about this happening, then that will dampen down her oxytocin a little bit, because it's a bit like saying, okay, well, when we made this baby, my mother-in-law was watching. She's sort of got those kind of thoughts, like she's worried about him watching. It's a little bit like if you were worried about your mother-in-law watching whilst you're making the baby. So she maybe what might be a really good place to start is if they watch some stuff together about the point of birth. So if they saw and looked at some videos where a baby is born, so he knows what to expect and she knows what to expect. I mean, I would say, excuse me, I would say that almost what's going on down there during birth is pretty unrecognisable from what's there on a normal basis. So the changes that happen as the baby is born mean that actually it doesn't look anything like it does normally, which might be enough to sort of reassure her that he's not going to go, oh my God, that I'm comparing that with that, because they're polar opposites. The other thing, of course, is that if a woman is in this position when she's giving birth, and I'm going to still be able to see me actually when I get on the ground. Can you still see me down here? Yeah. So if this is how we normally see women giving birth on TV, and there's a bed, so you're seeing people lie down on a bed. Now, if you see a woman giving birth in this position and dad is at the business end, let's say down here, then yes, he's going to get a full visual of what's going on, albeit looking very different to how it does normally. But the reality is that actually that's not a really great place for a woman to give birth, and to be upright is a much better position for a woman to give birth. So either in this position, or standing, or squatting, or even over the end of the bed like this. Now, in that position, yes, a dad can be down there, but the dad wouldn't see what mum's worried about him seeing, because all he would see is a head emerging. It wouldn't be quite so graphic as perhaps it would be laid in that laying down position. So yeah, I mean, my suggestions would be have a look at some birth stuff together, have a look at some birth stuff where you do have a woman lying down on her back, and see how sort of graphic, if you like, that is, but also then look at how it is when they're not laying down, because actually not laying down is much easier usually for mum, and it's much easier for baby. You've got gravity on your side, so actually being in that position, dad could see quite a lot but not see very much of mum, only see much of baby. But ultimately it is down to mum, because you don't want that with her, and sort of worrying her. But I suppose there's a conversation between both of them, isn't it, that as you get towards the end of birth, at the end of the process, is that dad might be with mum, and he asks her at that point and says, can I look? Is it okay for me to watch? And she can make that decision then at that time. She may well feel at that point, no, I'm fine. I have no inhibitions about this now. I'm okay for him to watch. But she may say, no, I'd like to use to respect it and stay here. So it's, I think, and it always, I feel like it's a record, it comes back to education. It comes back to, let's look at it together, let's see what this looks like, let's see how we feel about this together, and then let's chat about it again.
I think in that moment as well, you don't really care, do you?
No, I think you don't. I think perhaps you don't. I mean, like, kind of, you sort of, women will say to me when I'm, when we're doing antenatal ed, what should I wear in a birth pool? And so I say, you can wear a bikini top or a vest top, and you just put your pants on, or bikini pants or whatever. Most women, when they see a birth pool, will just rip off their clothes. They don't care what they've got on. They're in it, so they don't care. And everything, they don't mind they have nothing on. But that's not to say that all women don't feel that. And as I say, oxytocin is very shy, and we have our brain, our human brain, is not very helpful when it comes to birth, because our neocortex, sort of like higher order thinking bit, has this thing that other mammals don't, and it has modesty, and modesty doesn't work very well in birth. We need to lose the modesty, so we need to keep that 21st century brain switched off. Now, if this mum has her 21st century brain switched off because she's so in the moment and she's so relaxed and there's so much oxytocin going on, then probably she won't care. And that's when the women just rip off their clothes and they just jump in the birth pool. But if her neocortex is on, then her modesty will click in, and we don't really want the modesty clicking in, and nor do we want the neocortex clicking in, because that's when all this other stuff starts rumbling around, going risk, the problems, I see what I see on TV, all this kind of stuff starts coming in. And actually, we just want our mammal brain to control our mammal body to have our baby, and that would be easier. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Fran.
Are there any more questions?
That's it for now.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll bring in my assistant now just to show you a couple of things that you might want to do as a birth partner and practice in pregnancy. So, Sophie, do you want to come over? So, normally I might get a pregnant person, but obviously we can't see anyone at the moment, so do you want to kneel down? So, one thing that's really, really nice for oxytocin generation, and also gives dad something, or birth partner something practical to do, because, as I said, sometimes it is what you need to do is just to do nothing, but other times, it feels like, well, I need to do something. And for most people, some massage works really, really nice during birth. So again, it's about talking in pregnancy. First of all, because the massage in pregnancy is really nice, but also this is the opportunity to work out what mum likes and what dad or birth partner is capable of, and therefore it doesn't need to be spoken during the birth room. And so what we don't want to happen is dad starts doing something in the birth room and mum's going, no, not like this, do this, do this, do this, because she just needs to switch off her brain. So the first thing I'm going to show you is called the Waterfall massage. So this is just running the fingers down the spine in a continuous motion. So starting right from the top of the neck and then just bringing the fingers down towards the base of the spine, just really, really gently. And so just practicing this, it seems really, really simple, and it is really, really simple, but it is also really, really relaxing. And whilst you're doing this, just to tune in to the breath of mum. So breath is really, really powerful during birth. It's a really, really powerful way to relax. So for dad, just to not sort of be necessarily chatting a huge amount with mum, but just sort of tuning to her breath and following her breath and breathing with her. And as she starts to perhaps feel a contraction, to just mirror her breath, but to also help her to control it by keeping your breathing steady. So that's just Waterfall massage, and it's really, really nice, really relaxing. Really, I'm only doing it really, really gently. But that sense of touch also is really great for oxytocin generation. So that's Waterfall massage. So the other thing we can do is heart massage. So just starting in the middle of the shoulder blades at the back here, with your hands you're going to draw up and sort of create a heart shape, and then over the back of the shoulders, and then bringing that down to the base of the spine, and then coming back up the spine, and then again sort of drawing your heart shape over the top of the shoulder blades, just down the arms there, and down we go to the spine again. It's that heart shape massage up and round. Now, obviously, this massage works really nicely if you've got some nice body lotion or just some nice essential oils, so some lavender oil would be really nice. So just over the arms, down, around. So you're just drawing a heart, basically, on mum's back, down and around. Now, obviously, Sophie doesn't have a pregnant tummy. Thank God. But what we could add here is you could bring your arms down and round, and then you could just do a nice little rub on the tummy here, and then down and round here, and then up we go again, and then down and round, and then just like a nice rub on the tummy too. The other thing we can do, doesn't kneel up, so she's very good as a demo dolly, isn't she? Right, there you go. So the next thing we can do is we can also just think about some pressure down here on the bottom of the spine. So here, so this, we're looking at this bit of the pelvis here. So what your pelvis is taking a lot of hammer during birth. So some pressure down here is really, really lovely. So you can use the heel of your hand down here. And this not so much in pregnancy. It can feel quite nice in pregnancy, but this is really, really good during the contraction. So just at the sort of base of the spine, And using your thumbs down here can feel quite nice too. And also giving a little squeeze at the hips. So basically what we're doing is squeezing here. And that squeezing can be really nice, again, during a contraction. But just having a little bit of a practice beforehand, just to see what feels good, is really, really important. So that's some massage. What else am I going to say? There's something else that I can't remember what it was now. The other thing, thanks Sophie, you can stay there if you want to stay on the thing. The other thing is just to think about, it might necessarily be back, but ask your birth partner, ask your the birthing mum, what do they like having done? Like, do they like having their feet played with? Do they like having their hair played with? I sat with one of my clients once, and I just stroked her hair, and it was just like it was just all she needed. It was so relaxing for her just to have her hair stroked. So talk about this stuff beforehand, and that's how you have a sort of list of things in your toolkit to apply as a birth partner. Anything else, Jade?
No more questions have come in.
No more questions. Is there anything you can think of that I haven't talked about?
I don't think so. I think everything just goes out of the window anyway, doesn't it? I had a birth plan and everything I wanted, and it all just changed on the day, and I was shouting at Joe to do this and do that, and then when he did it I was shouting at him for doing it wrong.
I think it's about the power of the plan is not in achieving the plan. Nobody measures the success of their birth, or whether it was a positive birth, by whether or not they can tick off the stuff on their plan. The way people reflect on their birth is how positive they felt about that. They feel positivity based on how they felt. And if they felt in control, and if they felt calm, and if they felt loved, and if they felt listened to, and if they felt that their choices, not necessarily the plan, but their choices when they were asked during the birth, were respected. Many of my clients come to me and they have a plan for birth, and we spend lots of time talking about this plan, and sometimes that plan goes totally out the window, to the extent that you can go from somebody who wants a completely unmedicalised birth, no interventions, that they're in their head, that's what they're aiming for, and they can end up in theatre with an emergency caesarean birth, but that they can still feel amazing about that caesarean birth because they had their choices listened to, because they still got skin to skin, because they got some amazing first photos of their baby, because their partner was there with them, because their feeding choices were respected, because they made the decision to go to theatre rather than being told this is what we're doing to you, because they had an amazing couple of hours in the pool first, because even though maybe they planned this birth, they made a decision 3 or 4 days beforehand to go down caesarean route, whatever that might be. You can still have a phenomenally positive birth, which is totally different to your plan, because you felt, as I say, you felt loved and you felt respected, and your oxytocin levels were still maintained. I mean, when birth feels, when you have a negative experience, it's usually because of sort of like panic and stress and loads of adrenaline. And what comes with the adrenaline is all of the things that you associate with fear. And so you remember your birth as a place where you felt fear and stress and panic, and all of the things that come when you get frightened because somebody, a tyre pops on the street when you're, that kind of that feeling, and you don't want to have that feeling about birth. You want that kind of really oxytocin-filled feeling. And it comes down to how a woman is treated and how people communicate with her and how she is listened to and if she feels loved. And that is why, as a birth partner, ultimately your role is to be the guardian of and generator of oxytocin, because that is what brings the love.
I think going back to what you said at the beginning as well about having photos and things like that, like a lot of my clients where I photograph a birth, they've had like Polaroid pictures clipped up on fairy lights and things like that, and it's really helped them throughout. Like when they've had a contraction, they just look at the photos of family, friends, wedding, other children, and they can focus on that. So I do think that's a really good thing to have. I mean, I didn't have that, but most of my clients that I've photographed during birth have, and it does work so well. And it's something you can do together beforehand as well. So you can actually look at the photos together, decide which ones to print, and I think that's a nice birth prep as well that you can do in isolation.
Yeah, no, it is, yeah. It's all about the oxytocin factor.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that.
That's all right.
Does anybody else have any questions before we end? Quite a few people watching, but I think they're all shy.
I feel like I jabbered on for ages. I didn't mean to jabber on.
No, it's helpful. I think it's just reassuring people as well, isn't it? Because it's such a scary time to be giving birth. So
yeah, and I think that's why it is more important than ever that you understand birth and you understand your choices, because if you don't, then it's at the moment there are so many unknowns. There are always lots of unknowns when it comes to birth, but at the moment there are so many. So it's about narrowing down what you can control. Like, let's control what we can control, and then let's accept what we can't. Yeah. And as long as we know that how we can categorise those things, I think that's really, really helping people.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't think there's any more questions coming.
Okay.
If people have them, then obviously just comment, and I'm sure Sarah will be happy to reply to you.
No problem.
Lovely.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Jade. Have a lovely Easter, everyone. Enjoy the sunshine, hopefully, from your garden or on your daily exercise. And
that's it. Hope you have sun in your garden.
Yeah. Take care. Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.